So for our handsome Mr. W, ready, sir? We're going to warm up with a little bit with our long line. So a lot of folks for recall practice will at times work their puppies off gear. So remember, when you're off gear, that is perfectly fine in a safe environment. If your puppy's never been exposed to a long line, you can see he might start to think it's a little bit of a toy. So I sometimes just like to have them practice wearing gear and just have it be out and about. He is getting a little tired. It is towards the end of his little practice session. Ready? Find it. So a lot of times if your puppy is having a bit of a hard time with something new, take your time with it. See if you can get them to figure it out. So I'm going to go ahead. He says, this feels so weird. So if he feels a little bit funny with it dragging on the back, I'm just going to hook it up in the front and see if that makes a difference for the handsome guy. I know he's going to roll around because he's a fuzzy eye. Ready? Come here. Good job. He's so much hair. It's hard to find his equipment sometimes. So if he's a little bit of a jumping jelly bean, I'm just going to ignore. Nice little shake off, sir. So the reason you may want to practice with, again, the equipment kind of on and dragging is it can get your puppy in the rhythm of trying something novel, but then not have it to be the one time you actually go and work recalls is the only time you've plopped the equipment on. If your babe is sensitive to gear or to things touching them, I'd recommend even just get them comfortable dragging a simple 6-foot leash in the home while you're there supervising. Because he's, again, a little bit newer to a harness. He's also a little bit newer to some of these items while on. He's going to go grab a chew toy because he's getting pooped out. But the benefit of having a long line is view it like training wheels. So if your puppy is having a hard time staying nearby and responding to his name or checking in, I would definitely work with recall practice in the home first. So remember, you want to start off in the calmer or simpler environment, so you're setting him up for greater success. So for Mr. W to do well, you'd want to go ahead and obviously have goodies on you. Maybe he's often lounging somewhere and you practice having him come to you, feed him, and then if he's still hanging out with you, maybe another family member or someone nearby who's in your home can help by having the puppy also bounce back and forth between 2 different people or more. If you're going to have multiple family members helping with recall, make sure, nice job, sir, that only one person at a time is actually calling the puppy. This can sometimes be hard for smaller humans. They tend to all want to call the puppy at the same time, which makes it hard for the puppy to be in multiple places at once. Nice job, sir. So with the long line, the benefit of this is then your puppy cannot, get so far away. Nice little sit. Your puppy can't get so far away that they're out of range when they don't yet have the skill set for knowing what recalls are. So some of my first little rules for recall is make sure you're not making the recall the end of fun. So if every time you call your puppy from outside, or is every time you call them from a play moment, ready, Winston, then your puppy might start to think that every time you call them, it's going to be the end of the adventure. The other option too, he's like, no, I really would rather just nibble it off. So if your puppy does tend to go for gear, I'm just going to grab a little chew toy for him real quick while we're blabbing. Ready, sir? So that way, in between, when we go and practice a few skills in just a minute, ready? Nice job. So if he's looking for something to mouth on, always try to have a few easy items to reach for to implement for him to chew on instead of the original object, which could be equipment or household items or gear. So for right now, with our handsome guy, he is probably going through his second teething phase. A lot of times your puppies, as they grow, they're incisors in the back. That tends to happen around the 9-month mark, give or take a few months, depending on the puppy. But that's where they're going to go through a whole nother ordeal of that excessive mouthy and chewing behavior because of the fact that those incisors are growing out and coming into their jawline. So for Mr. Handsome, when he's enjoying an inappropriate chew, now again, I could be blabbing and doing a few other things while I know he's gnawing on the appropriate item. And then when we go to practice with recalls, remember, you want to be not creating a recall as the end of fun, like we mentioned. So if, let's say, your puppy had been doing a really great job coming when called, and now all of a sudden the moments that he's like, no, I really would love it. Ready? So here's your chew, sir. So let's say every time you call your puppy in the beginning, they were doing amazing coming to you from the yard and back into the house. eventually your puppy's going to put the dots together, and if every time you call them it means come into the home and now we're in a calmer or more boring environment, hi handsome, then the problem there is your puppy can start to associate coming inside with the end of fun. So while he is, again, having a little bit of a harder time with the gear for a moment, I'm just going to give him a little breather. We'll attach the gear again when I'm ready to have him practice a little bit on the longer lead. So remember, sometimes as you're working on certain skills, your puppy may be saying, hey, I'm not quite ready for that step. And then we might take a break from it and then reapply it when we're ready to work with him. So if Mr. Handsome's getting a little tired, then of course going for a chew item or doing some find its or some other appropriate, nice job, options would be better for him. So back to recall. Make sure recalls do not become the end of fun. So as I was mentioning, if your puppy tends to come when called from outside, eventually might start to not be as responsive because every time you've called them in the home, and again, it went to that sort of calmer or more boring environment. The other one is don't pair recalls with something scary. So let's say your puppy is scared of tubby time or they're overwhelmed by nail time. You could, at that point, if you're pairing, hey, you come, and then we push him into the tub, or we say, hey, you come, and then we have the nail clippers in our hands, we may, I'm just reinvigorating the chew, is we may then get him to think the next time you call him again could be for one of those trick moments. So if, let's say, you call him to you and then you bring him into the bathtub and that's something he's still working on but he doesn't love it, then the next time you call him, he's not sure if it's going to be a tubby time of doom or if it's going to be just fun check-in for nothing too spooky. So if he did have to get something done or he had to get leashed up, I wouldn't pair it with your recall because then that association can become tainted or not a positive association. The other one, your third recall rule would be if your puppy happened to run off and then they finally come in and check in with you, if you scold them when they finally come to you, they're going to think you're mad because they came, not because of all the madness they may have done prior. So if they were romping through Route 2 and heading back home eventually, and you finally got them, getting mad at them when they finally come to you will tell them that later it could be dangerous to come check in with you down the road. So if you're pairing negative moments with a recall or you're making recalls kind of not so much fun, you're going to ruin a very good behavior that could be very beneficial for safety situations. So make sure that when working with him, recalls are easy peasy and attainable. So what I was going to do with the recall and the long line was, let's say when he is on the long line, let's say we call him once and nothing happens because maybe he's distracted by bunny poop or he heard a noise or something's going on. He did a good job checking in. Then from there, I would say, again, the second recall, but from half the distance. So I'm going to show you as well visually so you can see with him what I'm saying. But you want to make sure that you don't say your recall more than twice. So I tend to do 2 recalls and then we're done and I have to assess, is this too hard for the puppy? Do they understand the game in general? Or is the environment so overwhelming that I've completely lost my puppy to that environment? So if your babe barely has a recall and now you're trying to do it in the real world, you may be by accident reinforcing not coming when called. So if, let's say, my puppy's an eager beaver and he's doing some jumping, I sometimes like to feed the floor just for a moment, leash up the beauty to where I'd like him to be. So now let's say we're going to do a little bit with recall practice with our longer lead. I normally recommend for a lead length, I probably would go like 15 to 20 feet. You can go bigger, but a lot of times the longer it gets, the more lead that you and the puppy have to deal with. And for some folks, it can be a little overwhelming. So I like to start this off by having the puppy on the equipment. I'm going to toss a little snack off in the distance to let him go and find it. And then as he comes to you, feed for that response. If your puppy jumps the gun, so they come to you before you even had a chance to call them, simply go ahead and feed them anyway for that response of coming to you. You do want to make sure that your puppy has enough lead to get to the thing and then come back to you. Yes, nice job. So find-its are some of my favorites to work on in the beginning. That's a very nice sit. I am, again, capturing these little moments where he offers softness next to me because I want him to think, again, there's value in not jumping on me. So again, we're going to toss another little item for the handsome guy to go find it. And then from there, I might go again, Winston, come. Yes. So let's say, for example, and again, some of these snacks, I guess he decided he didn't love them as much. So we'll just put them back in the treat pouch for another time. So let's say he's doing a really nice job bouncing back and forth between the find it and coming when called. Eventually, you might get to a moment where he's very lost, he's very distracted. So let's say, for example, I have a few items off to the side, he's busy sniffing. Let's say I called his name, but nothing happened. That's where you can either collect up your lead, or you could walk down the leash to prevent him from going further away, and then call him from that secondary position. So I'm just going to grab a few little tidbits so we can pretend as if my puppy was distracted with something in the environment, and then go from there. So let's pretend, I'm going to set up like little find it over here for a moment. So let's pretend he's distracted, there's bunny poop, there's a smell. I've called him once for pretend, he was non-responsive. I can either walk down my leash and then get to about half the distance and try from here. If he was non-responsive from this point, I would then go all the way to my puppy and get his attention from there, and then go, ready, Winston, and then bring him away from the distraction, and then feed for the connection back with me. Nice. So if your puppy, for example, has a hard time coming back, make sure, ready, that you're not making the coming to you very overwhelming or the end of fun, but also make sure that it's attainable for him to work these skills. So let's say, again, he did a really nice job. I'm going to release the beast so we can go and grab some more of those little tidbits. But when working with a new piece of equipment, keep it short and sweet for greater success. And especially if he's not used to the equipment, we want him to feel comfortable doing it and trying it. So with the handsome guy, start off with some recall practice in the home. Then maybe practice this a little bit around the yard, hi handsome, and work it that way. And if you're really finding he's struggling, it could be rushing the steps, or he doesn't quite understand the game, so try again with a softer setup. But he did a very good job, so we're going to give him a little breather, and we'll come back to working a few more skills in a bit.